Welcome back to the Pursuit Podcast. Over the last few episodes, we've been looking at different aspects of learning to code. And today, we're going to be taking a look at the value of creativity in learning to code or in learning anything new.
I'm here today with
Jenn Schiffer.
Jenn, what do you do?
I am an engineer or web developer now, a writer and artist. I work as a community engineer at Fog Creek on a fairly new product called Glitch, which is at glitch.com.
So today I've asked you to come on and talk about the value of creativity in learning to code, not just for newbies, but just in technology in general. Do you see Glitch as a creative platform?
Oh, for sure. Me and the rest of the people on the Glitch team, there's several of us, all have backgrounds in education and or art and have had a history of just like making cool creative stuff. And I think that shows in the way the product looks and works. And I think that creativity is not only a great sort of platform to get on when you're learning to code, but continuing to learn because, in this industry, you constantly have to be learning. And so we think a lot about that when we're creating features and showcasing apps on Glitch and showcasing what people are making with it. Creativity is one of the top pillars of it.
So far, what our dear listener knows is that creativity is really important and that Glitch is great at it. Can you walk us through a little bit more of what Glitch is?
Sure. We call Glitch the friendly community where you'll build the app of your dreams. And when we say that, we mean, one, we're focusing on a friendly community, which is really important because it's hard to be creative when there are bad actors around you holding you back from being creative. We know this, and when we grew up in school and most industries, there are always people or things trying to stifle creativity. So we're trying to stop that. We give you an in-browser editor. So we sort of lower the barrier to portability. If you have a browser, you have access to building on Glitch, and it's free. And when you write code on Glitch, we auto-deploy it online. So essentially, you make your first website or your first web app, or you prototype something, we put it online for you. You don't have to worry about DevOps stuff. You have your own unique URL. Again, this is free. And so that lowers the barrier to having to know how to get things on the internet versus actually creating stuff. And then our community of users and ourselves, we've created some awesome starter apps and built really cool things that we showcase on glitch.com that if you see something that you like to use, you can go ahead and use it. You don't have to be a developer to use Glitch. We kind of see it like the YouTube of coding, the YouTube of apps. There's a lot of cool web VR stuff that you might want to just play around with. There are a lot of games that you want to play, a lot of useful civic tech apps that you can just use. You don't have to know how to code. You just use those apps just like in any web app store. But if you decide you want to tinker around with something or you see a cool app that you're like, oh, I want to update this on my own or I want to learn how to use it, you can view the source of it, both the client-side code like HTML and CSS, but also the server-side stuff, which you can't view the source of in the browser. You can view in the Glitch editor. And you can remix those apps. So you can make your own copy of them so that you can then edit it and make it your own. So really, there's a lot of avenues for both creation and use of other people's creativity on the platform.
So I may be sort of dating myself a bit here, but this reminds me a lot of GeoCities back in the day, where you would have, if our listeners are significantly younger than perhaps I am, GeoCities was a free website hosting service back in the day where you could either come in, and if you didn't have any HTML or CSS wasn't a thing then, was it? If you didn't have any HTML skills, you could just use a template.
Yeah.
And then they had sort of middle way step. You had a medium template where you could do a little bit of fiddling, and then you could tab into just HTML. And this sounds really familiar where you're saying, hey, you can go ahead and use pre-mixed apps without needing to do anything, without needing to know how GitHub works or how to get it running once you've downloaded it.
Yeah, we think a lot about communities that we working on the product were super into when we were learning how to build on the web. And those communities were GeoCities, of course, which not only the tools of, there's like a WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get editor, so you can drag and move around stuff. But yeah, copying templates and building your own site very easily. And GeoCities just like put it online for you. You didn't have to figure out how to do that. other communities like MySpace developers, MySpace users who updated CSS for their friends and their bands. Neopets is also another community. These are all communities.
I was about to say.
Yeah, these are all communities that were from that time period, had a certain aesthetic that was like fun and colorful, but were places where you can also foster friendships. We joke a lot, but are kind of serious at the idea of like people meeting on Glitch and who's going to be the first couple to get married after meeting on Glitch. We want those sort of fun stories that not necessarily have anything to do with the actual product, but just because the community fostered a place where people can become friends and stuff. That's sort of what we look to. So GeoCities, huge influence, as well as like Neopets and MySpace.
So I've been talking to a lot of people recently about what the first little bit of code or first little bit of HTML they wrote was. So many people have said GeoCities. Mm-hmm. So many unexpectedly people have said Neopets, which just came out of nowhere for me.
Yeah, Angel Fire. I think GeoCities was my first intro. I always remembered learning about how bandwidth works because I would make a web page and I would show it off in a chat room and a bunch of people would look at it and I ran out of bandwidth and you'd go to my site and like it would be the big Yahoo logo. You've hit your bandwidth limits. And then I went on to search, what is bandwidth? How do I get more of it? And then I learned about hosting. And so then I, years later, become a sort of DevOps person. But my sort of entry into code was wanting to make a Weezer fan site and also a web page to show off photos I had taken with my Nikon Coolpix 2000. We talk about Neopets. Neopets is still around, but it's a different kind of community. We think a lot about LiveJournal as well and all these sort of communities that down the line, I guess, don't have the same sort of magic to them. You know, companies get bought, sites are shut down, like GeoCities is shut down. LiveJournal is bought by a Russian company, so technically it's not a safe space for gay people. I think a lot about how in 10, 20 years down the line, it would be cool to hear somebody on a podcast being like, oh yeah, I like got into code from this cool community called Glitch. And everyone being like, yeah, Glitch, you know, that's sort of the dream.
And when we're talking about building the community and we're talking about creativity, what kinds of experiences you want everyone to have, I'm also really interested in the aesthetics of Glitch. So it's glitch.com, I think?
Yep.
And if our dear listener was to get there, what kinds of things would they see?
I think the first thing they'll notice is the turtle on a skateboard saying, you got this. That's usually what my eye is drawn to. It's, as a seasoned web developer, when I think of web developer tools, I think dark backgrounds, bright monospace colors, syntax highlighting. But when you go to glitch.com, you see a white page, you see cartoon characters, you see colors, illustrations. That aesthetic and much of the illustrations are from my team member, Persian, who literally is the design genius behind Glitch. He also is a front-end developer, so he built a lot of the front-end stuff. And friends of his or people that he looked up to, either inspiring drawings or actually doing some art for not only our site, but also our editorial stuff. There's this idea that he always brings up about, you know, when you think of illustrations for a site that's a tech product, you see like zeros and ones and computers and stuff, and he tries to avoid all of that. So we'll have like turtle on a skateboard or like a floating frog or a picture on the wall of the sun, things that don't evoke technology because you're in an editor, you're on a site where there's technology, the illustrations around it don't have to convey what you're doing. It's kind of obvious otherwise, which people really appreciate. It's a change of pace. There's some people who see it then as a toy, but then they start to use it, or I tell them what kind of features there are, because it is an in-browser editor. There is a console you can access. Every project is a Git repo, like all the stuff that you need to build. It's also a collaborative editor. More than one person can be working in the app with you at a time. We have a hand raise feature, so if you get stuck, you can highlight the code you're stuck at, and you can ask the community for help, and they can come in and offer to help and show you how to not be stuck anymore. So it's technologically really powerful and super almost futuristic with how fast you can copy things. We use Docker containers, and that's like a fairly new sort of thing. And so the magic happening in the background to us is as colorful and vibrant, as fun as the illustrations and aesthetic of the site.
And it's just really interesting to have a look at. It's very, very different. And I love that you touched on the hand raise feature.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm really interested in when you come into sort of your profile, once you've signed up to Glitch and you signed up, you've got a big picture with your name and your projects. It's very, this is this thing for you. It's encouraging you to get involved. I also love that you have a little Kamoji smiley face right up at the top that changes.
Yeah, also a fun thing is our glitch fish, our glitch logo. Throughout the day, they change color based on the time of the day, which is just like a little bit of JavaScript. Actually, when I go out and teach people how to code using Glitch, one of the earlier examples I show them is how to get the date from the browser using JavaScript and say, like, now that you have the date, you can change the color of your site depending on what time of day it is, just like we do with the glitch fish. And people are like, oh, that's super cool. It's a very little bit of code that does something really cool and is like not in your face, which is fun to do.
So I think that's something to touch on as well. So you yourself and the rest of the Glitch team didn't just make a creative platform. You also go out and you build content and tutorials and put them online. You teach people in real life. Yeah, can you talk a bit about how you've mixed creativity into some of these outreach activities?
Sure. Yeah. So that's sort of where my community engineer role comes into play. In the past, I was an educator at a state university. And as I was transitioning from academia to the industry, I was speaking at conferences talking about how I had taught many students from ages 8 to 98 how to learn how to code by using art as the topic. Art is universal. It is existed long before any of us who are alive have and will exist longer than any of us will be alive. And it's something that we've been into from before we can even communicate properly. I always use the example of before babies can talk, they're playing with building blocks and stacking them, like they're creating something. And so what better theme or like idea to get into when writing code? You know, writing code is a medium for solving a problem. And it could also be a medium for expressing yourself, much like paints and crayons and stuff like that are mediums. When a lot of people are getting into learning how to code or learning a new technology, even if they've been coding for decades, one of the barriers is like, what do I code? What should I make? And then they stop or they move on to something else. And so if you think like, how can I make a piece of art or play around with something so that it generates something interesting and artistic and creative, that's just like a really effective way to stick to it. And we think a lot about that with Glitch in terms of being a collaborative editor. We have a lot of really creative people in the community. The web VR community has fully embraced us. So there's lots of really cool VR stuff on the site, people who make generative art and all of that. It feels almost too easy for me because I'll go to a meetup and someone's already, oh, and I built this on Glitch, which is cool. And then they'll like talk about what Glitch is. And then I'd be like, okay, well, I don't have to talk about Glitch because y'all did it already for me, which is nice. But we've been thinking a lot about how learning to code is really hard and people have been trying to learn to code for a long time. So let's try to think of what hasn't worked and try to solve or try to fill any holes out there that aren't being filled in terms of the learning to code space. And so we've been putting out a video series. We have an intro to building your first web app where it's like very bite-sized videos explaining what HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Node are with little apps that I built to go with it that you can view the source of and remix and get started on your own. And they're very small. They're very short intros. They're not definitive at all. I give you resources to move along, but sometimes you just need like a little push to get going. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Just enough information to either be dangerous or to do the thing you're looking for.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people are like, everyone needs to learn how to code. You all need to learn how to code. And I always say, not everyone should learn how to code, but everyone should have access to learn how to code if they want to. And some people don't know that they want to learn how to code. So if you give them, they watch like a 2-minute video and they realize how easy it could be for them if they have that access. They can go on and do really powerful things. Or they might realize this isn't really anything I'm interested in. This doesn't inspire me. And then they can go off and do something else that is interesting and inspiring to them.
So because this is my podcast and I get to do whatever I want, and I'm terribly biased, Let's talk a little bit more about how background as a former educator is probably the best possible thing you can have as a technologist working today.
Gosh, yeah. If you're on social media and tech, there's always these waves of you don't need to go to college to be a developer, which is true. That's entirely true. But there are some people who push it a little too far and they say if you have a college education, you wasted your time, which is not true. I'm a community engineer. I write code. I write good code. I know the foundations of computer science. I think about that stuff a lot. And I'm also a good communicator. Otherwise, Fog Creek wouldn't let me on podcasts or go on stage and travel the world and talk about stuff. And I attribute a large part of my ability to communicate with different levels of engineers and different people in different industries to going to college, because it pushed me from my little sort of childhood bubble into living with people who are studying all different kinds of stuff. And it's also incredibly humbling. I think a lot about how if you're at the top of your class in high school and you go to college and you're like everyone else who's at the top of their class in high school and you sort of start from the beginning, it's a humbling kind of experience. And I just continued going to school. I got my bachelor's and master's in computer science and then became a department administrator at Montclair State, where I advised hundreds of students who were studying computer science and information technology. And I taught at the undergrad and grad level intro to web development, Java. And I also did some curriculum planning and writing and all sorts of stuff that goes into keeping a computer science department up to date with the industry. Because the point is you're teaching all these students how to program because they want to go out and get jobs. And you want to prepare them for that. And you learn about, as an educator, is that everyone has a different background. Like, we are not on a level playing field. There's socioeconomic differences. There's cultural differences. I had lots of international students who were torn away from their degree because they visited back home and the US wouldn't allow them back in. That's happening even more with this administration. And so you learn about how life gets in the way of everything sometimes, and that like a thing that you're working on is not your entire life. There's like all these different variables. So I think I got a lot of my empathy from being an educator, because they're your babies. Even if they're like adults, you see them as like you're nurturing them because that's your job and that's like your passion. And so, yeah, when I meet people, one of my team members, Tim, is also a college educator. It's like you just know an extra sort of dimension of society when you've been through a low-paying job that is super highly impactful on a large group of people.
So this is something I was just having a discussion with a dear friend of mine. I've got a background in education as well before I moved into technology. And we were talking about how very rare it is to find people who have both high-level technical skills and high-level education skills. And I started thinking about how technology is a high investment, high monetary value skill relative to other industries, whereas education is a high investment in your skills, just like technology is, but a relatively low paying role.
Mm-hmm.
So you tend to get folks who invest either in one or the other, because once you have a high skill investment, high paying role, it often seems a bit weird to then double down and get excellent at another skill set that requires a huge amount of investment, but that's not going to do a lot for your bottom line.
Yeah. And also, there's a lot of the idea of being self-taught in tech. I always go out and say being self-taught is a fake idea, where it's like you could be self-directed, but you're using materials other people have created with you in mind. You're using the work of educators to help yourself. And when you're working in education, a lot of times you kind of like are alone, and you sort of, your own rubric is something that you created, and your own assessment is your stuff in the past. Like a class that you taught 10 years ago is infinitely better today because you sort of grew off of you learning what did or didn't work. And that doesn't necessarily happen in tech. But yeah, it's if this were my podcast, we would talk about capitalism the entire time. But someone the other day at a meetup that I helped run, she's new to tech and she is a TA at a boot camp now. She went to the boot camp to learn to code. Now she's a TA, and she's just like, my male students are condescending to me. and they don't listen to me, what's the point? I knew that it was bad, but I didn't know it was this bad. And I told her, you're going to deal with that in education. It's like, you might as well make a lot of money. That's why I went into tech.
Yeah.
But I'm very fortunate. The role I'm in now is obviously I have a lot of room for going out and educating people and creating educational tools for them, which is what I ultimately have wanted to do. And I make good money. I make very good money, I feel, for it. But I could be making twice as much working as an engineer at Netflix, but I wouldn't get the space to go out and do education. And so that's why I choose to stay in what some of my friends have called more humbling positions. Like,
wow, your friends are absolutely silly. This sounds like the coolest job possible.
Oh, for sure. And I think they get why I do it. And they also, I talk a lot about money with my friends and my peers, and they understand like education in this society typically means less money. And so it's an investment that I consider an investment I'm putting into society instead of my savings account.
So you've got enough money to live on.
Oh, for sure.
Enough money to buy a couple toys. Mm-hmm. And then you also get to be able to sleep at night.
Yeah. I've got 2 cats. They make it hard, but other than that.
Ethically, you can sleep at night. Yeah. Cats.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing in tech. I love to talk about ethics in tech. A lot of people who aren't ethical still sleep at night because no one's really like keeping them up. That'll change.
Well, nobody at the end of the day believes that they're a bad person or doing bad things. They're just...
Yeah. Well, when you're like, oh, I'm saving the world, I'm doing something no one else is doing, this is going to change everything. And you can blissfully ignore the non-1%, Yeah, you can like sleep at night.
So creativity isn't just a fantastic way to learn to code or to learn to sort of upskill or even to get better once you're already in industry. Focusing on creativity and sort of an ethical backbone in selecting your work can make your entire life better, it sounds like.
I think so. It depends on what your end game is. Like, some people truly don't care what people think about them. Some people don't care if there are more women in tech. Some people don't care if people on welfare have access to food and less food security. Like, they're just people who don't. And then there's some of us who care about all of those things and get severe burnout from it. And there are those of us who choose to try to focus on certain things because they feel like if you focus on one thing, you can be really impactful on it. There's just like a lot of different people. And that's what I've learned going into the tech industry is I've seen all those kinds of people. It's very interesting. I think that my coming from education and going to tech shows that I am super into people watching. This is sort of my going out and like teaching people gives me more access to learning about different types of people. And that's truly what I crave. It's not like the money or writing code. It's just sort of having a view into different kinds of lives. I think that's why I'm really good at community, because you have to have the ability to be open to that. You can't be that sort of stereotypical, that trope of the guy in the basement hacking in a dark room and is just like hacking into like government sites or whatever, what everyone thinks of when they think of a hacker. You can't be like that in order to actually do good, impactful community work.
Well, touching on the community and touching on creativity at the same time, what are some really creative, unexpected things that you've seen the community either produce or you've seen them do during your time at Glitch?
There's been a lot, and I've only been working at Fog Creek for a year. I mentioned WebVR a couple of times. Like, that truly blows my mind because I'm super into the open web. And so whenever there's stuff that we're used to on desktop software or different hardware, when I see that stuff happening in the browser, I get really excited because I want everything to work in the browser because then it's more accessible to different people. The WebVR community, especially A-Frame, which came out of Mozilla, open source, WebVR, working in the browser, making cool things. You can just look at it on your screen, or you can put it in like a Google Cardboard, like put your phone in one of those VR sets that are now fairly cheap. Like you can get something for like $5, and just sort of looking into a cool 3D space is pretty awesome. And A-Frame, for their A-Frame school, they use Glitch in all of their lessons. And so I basically have most of the web VR world at my fingertips when I'm on a product that I work on every day, which is really cool and empowering. There have been people who've showed me that they're teaching their kids how to code by making games on Glitch. I get emails all the time from parents who are like, my kid made this on Glitch and now I'm coding with them and stuff. And that's really cool. So not only what they're making with it, but how they're collaborating with their family members, their loved ones, and also their friends has been really cool to see.
So we've come around again and again to creativity in coding, creativity in learning to program, creativity. If our dear listener is a creative type, is artistic, is musical, and has been kind of thinking about learning to code, how would you nicely bully them into it? And what kind of advice would you give?
So I would tell them to go to glitch.com. We have different categories of apps that we showcase on the site, and two of those categories are art and music. Again, the browser...
Very convenient.
Yeah, the browser is a very powerful piece of software, and whether you have a laptop or a large desktop computer or a smartphone, you have a browser on your phone, so you can use Glitch, and you can use the apps that are on Glitch. And browsers now allow you to do not only listening to media, like watching videos, listening to music, but you can create those things with web software, with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I work with the web audio API, and I have some examples on glitch.com under the music category there. So you can see how you can use JavaScript to import a music file and see the frequency visualization of that song as it plays. And you can play and stop music and scrub through it. And you can write all of that with some time, but without any money. And that's pretty awesome because music software is usually expensive. So why not try to build your own tool? I think a cool example, because I'm biased because it's my own example of that, is I'm a pixel artist and I wanted a free portable tool in the browser to draw pixel art. So I created make8bitart.com, which is just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so you can draw pixel art in the browser for free, and it's fun and cool looking. I think there's a lot of parallels between make8bitart.com and Glitch, which is probably how I magically ended up at Fog Creek a year ago. It just seemed like it makes sense creating a free in-browser tool that allows you to express yourself in some sort of way. With make8bitart.com, it's pixel art. With Glitch, it's with code. So I'd say go to glitch.com and just look at the apps, and if you see anything that's cool and useful to you, then use it. But sometimes you'll find that people build apps that serve their own need or serve some specific need that is not quite what you need. And you can view the source and remix it and update it to meet your need, which is pretty empowering.
So this is fantastic advice for somebody who's already really into doing creative things, creative expression, and just getting into tech. What if you were going to try and politely bully somebody who's been in tech for ages? Let's say our dear listener's been a Java dev for 15 years, and they're like, well, what do I need all this extra creative stuff for?
Oh, that's interesting. I used to be a Java developer, so I totally know what you mean. If you feel fulfilled in what you're working on, then you're doing something creative. It might not seem creative to other people. I always use an example. I used to build these galaxy collision simulators in Java, which some people sounds really cool. To others,
how cool is that, right?
Right. To other people, it's like, oh, it's like physics and boring and stuff like that, or math. To me, it wasn't.
Where do you meet these people you know who are like, oh yeah, galaxies colliding, boring?
Well, I mean, when we released our intro, like build your first web app series on Glitch, immediately someone's like, JavaScript and Node don't belong in this intro. There's always someone who is going to be mad for some arbitrary reason. But
internet weirdos, fair enough.
Yeah, randos. Which I used to call them randos, and I'm like, it's probably bad because now I work in community and they are a part of the community in some sort of way. But whether I have to interact with them is also another thing. There are people who have their own ideas, or they're just trying to express themselves through anger, and that's fine because anger is a medium of expression, much like code and pixel art. But yeah, if you don't think that you need art, that's totally fine. Then just don't actively consume art. But then what's important is don't trash on people who learn code or make art with code, because that's a pattern I've seen. And that was something I dealt with a lot when I was in college, and a lot of my project examples and demos were creating art with code, and it was like, oh, that's not real development. Like I was told I wasn't a real developer. She's actually like an artist, in quotes. So don't shit on people for being creative, because that is human nature. Creativity is not a form of weakness. It is the backbone of society. To solve problems in a way that the largest number of people are helped and not hurt requires creativity. It implies that you're thinking about something and solving a problem and figuring out what tools to use and using them in an appropriate way. So you don't have to actively enjoy art or think that art and code is cool, but don't shit on people who do think that way.
Fantastic.
We'll let you write your boring Java apps. We'll let you write your boring Java apps, or even your exciting Java apps. I hate using Java as an example because I was a Java developer and I do really love Java. Java has the best tooling
I've got
out
no
there.
beef with Java.
Yeah, but I know like a lot of people like do, because that's what they learned in college and then realize that they want to be web developers. It doesn't translate over as well. But if you want to build your apps that aren't creative, that's fine. We're letting you do that. We're not like shitting on you for that. You do what you do, we'll do what we do, and we'll all live in harmony, and that's it.
So fantastic advice. If you're creative and you're thinking about learning to code, the browser is your window onto almost every household in the world. If you're not into working creatively with code, that's cool. Just do your thing, but don't pull other people down.
Right.
Jenn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Where can people find you online?
So, glitch.com. My username is Jenn Schiffer. So if you go to glitch.com/@Jenn Schiffer, Jem at two N's, you can see all the apps that I've worked on Glitch. You can remix any of them and make cool stuff. Hopefully, you can let me know about them. I'm on Twitter @Jenn Schiffer. JENNSCHIFFER, and jenmoney.biz is it is my personal website where you can see all the stuff I'm working on, all of my art and stuff like that.
I've always found that .biz is the second most reputable top-level domain right after .money.
Oh, for sure. I have Jen.money. But,
oh my God, do you?
But there's something about .biz that harkens back to like those old GeoCities days. Like some people think .biz is a new TLD, like .kitchen and all of that. But no, .biz.
Is there a .kitchen?
There's a .kitchen, yes. But
all right.
But .biz was, there's .com, .biz, .ws for website. .biz is my favorite TLD, and it's old school.
This could go on for ages and ages. We'll go ahead and let you go. And dear listener, if you're interested, this is a fantastic jumping off point to sort of ignore some work and spend some time poking around what top-level domains exist. Thank you so much for listening.
If you join us again next week, we're going to be talking to the founder of BaseCS, a program designed to help folks not just learn to program, because a lot of us already know that, but aimed at helping people really understand the fundamentals of computer science.